and thank you for listening to the Bakers Inside podcast. I'm Dan DeRocha, president of Erica Record, and we are in our Baker's Lab. And today, we're going to talk about ovens. So to talk about ovens, I brought on Cindy. Cindy Chananie is a sales consultant of ours here at Erica. She has exclusive experience with ovens, and she's an oven master, expert, whatever you want to, however you want to label it. So there's no better person for me to bring on to talk about ovens than Cindy. So Cindy, tell us a little bit about how you got into the baking industry and why you have so much oven experience.
Thanks, Dan. So somehow I ended up with a degree in manufacturing technology, and needing a job like everybody else, I went on a couple job interviews. One was a clothing manufacturer, which you would think I'd lean toward, but I ended up going for an interview at Winkler USA, and well, I guess the rest is history. That's the beginning of the entrance to the ovens.
Okay, so let's just take it from the beginning, the uninitiated approach to buying an oven. So I want to buy an oven. What do I need to know? So
I would say the first thing that we should identify are what kind of products that you're going to make.
Okay, so let's play a game. Let's go through it. So I'm gonna make sourdough.
Okay, sourdough.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the trend right now, sourdough, and typically...
That's why I picked it.
Yeah, of course. And typically people are leaning toward a deck oven for that. There are some people making it in a rack oven, but if you want to make a true traditional sourdough in the artisan methods, then you want to go with a deck oven.
Right. Is it because of the baking on the hearth?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're baking on a stone hearth, you're going to get conductive heat from the hearth surface and radiant heat coming from the top, and that's going to help develop your crust.
All right, so I'm making sourdough, but like I guess the next question is, am I making like a little bit of sourdough, or am I making a lot of sourdough, right?
Yeah, it dictates actually a lot of different things. I mean, the reality is right now we can offer an oven for one 18 by 26 inch pan all the way up to a tunnel oven that's the length of a football field, really. So we have to determine how much you're making, and then I would say the next step is to figure out the dimensions and the space that you actually have to put an oven.
What about electric versus gas?
That's actually a really great question, and I feel like that's a question that I get regularly. The truth is, for our ovens, the Tagliavini brand, the actual quality of the bake is virtually the same whether you're baking it on electric, whether you're baking it on a gas cyclothermic or a gas steam tube oven. Really what it boils down to is the space that you have, the amount that you're going to make, and then the budget that you're going to put into this. But I would say, generally speaking, you're going to probably stick with an electric oven if you're going anywhere from 1 to 20 pans. And beyond that, then we would start recommending gas, because the cost of your utility bills gets to be pretty steep with electric when you go beyond 20 pans.
Would electric also be useful in the sense that you're making a variety of products?
Yes.
Or you're not baking the same product for a long stretch of time, because it gives you the ability to change your temperature faster?
Right, that's correct. So when you are using an electric oven, actually there's a lot of flexibility in there. So you can have a different temperature on each deck. You can actually control the top heat and the bottom heat. It's quite flexible too. If you have a big bake that day, you can keep all your decks on, and if it's a shorter bake, you can turn decks off.
You touched a little bit on tunnel ovens. Is there a metric on when a tunnel oven makes sense?
Yeah, okay, so, you know, people like to say that they want to have a tunnel oven because there's very little labor involved there, but, you know, you have to be a pretty big industrial bakery, a light industrial bakery, all the way to a big, huge commercial bakery. But that is, I would say, nobody opens up a bakery and starts with a tunnel oven. They are probably already having, 20 rack ovens, or they have multiple deck ovens, something like that.
You're getting pretty close to 24/7 baking?
Oh yeah.
If not, if already not there already?
Yeah, so if you have a tunnel oven, it's basically 24-hour baking, and you also have a fully automatic line feeding that, so the whole time. Generally, people that are looking at a tunnel oven are very often building a building to house this new line that you're going to put in.
You mentioned two things pretty quickly, and I want to just talk about the difference of those. In artisan baking, very often, you hear about steam tube ovens. and then you mentioned cyclothermic ovens. What's the big difference here, and is there a shift, is there a change, or what can we expect?
Okay, so this is also a really good question because they'll both make really great artisan bread. The reality is that steam tube technology is a much older technology. In fact, everybody had steam tube technology at one point. In the early 50s is when cyclothermic technology came on board.
50s?
Yeah.
That's quite a while.
Yep. So it's not new technology at all. It's I would say sometimes people are maybe confused by one or the other because often companies are not offering both technologies. We're in a great position because we do. But there's some huge advantages. Let's back up a second. Back in the day when they were really focused on steam tube technology in the past years, it really developed out of a time when they were making a very big loaf of bread that baked long and slow. And people weren't buying a 3-pound loaf of bread. You would go to the baker and say, you'd see a giant loaf of bread and you'd take a slice of that bread home, and that's kind of how it works.
That was still a pound.
Yeah, exactly. But today that doesn't really apply to what people are doing.
Those are like the showpiece.
Exactly.
There's not very often you're buying a giant bowl of bread. You might see it in the window, but it's not usually readily available for sale.
Exactly. Nobody's really doing that anymore. So the reason for cyclothermic technology to come together was because there were some problems with steam tube technology. So the first problem is that when you build a true steam tube oven, it's going to have brick and concrete poured into the base. And when you have a situation that you're creating so much mass, it's great to hold on to the temperature, but it's also bad if you want to be flexible and lower your temperature. So with the steam tube oven, if you're baking at 450 degrees and you decide you want to bake a different product at 400 degrees, you literally can be waiting hours for this temperature drop. So the cyclothermic, since we have hot air traveling in a radiator, it's much easier to be flexible with your temperature. Also, since we don't have this brick and the poured concrete, if you ever move your bakery, which happens all the time, you can take your oven with you. With the steam tube oven, with poured concrete and brick, you're not taking that oven with you.
But the steam tube, if you're making, because it's not necessarily bad, it's just different, right? If you're making one product, big product, bigger, let's say bigger, and you're just making a lot of it.
Oh yeah.
Probably, and you love your building, and you're not moving.
Yeah. If you're not moving, then it's great. I mean, we have a fabulous steam tube oven. I'm not knocking the steam tube technology. Actually, if you're only wanting to bake with one temperature and you're just doing mass production of big loaves of bread, by all means, steam tube technology is the way to go.
All right. Okay, deck ovens. We covered quite a bit. Any other advantages about electric deck ovens?
Yes. So some other advantages of an electric deck oven are that you don't really have to commit up front to where you might end up. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of electric deck ovens that are modular. So you can literally start out with 2 decks. And if you decide, hey, I'm really doing well on my artisan breads, in a couple years pass or 1 year passes, you can add more decks. So it really gives you the flexibility to invest the least amount of capital in your equipment from the get-go.
It's the lowest barrier to get in.
Right, exactly.
Okay, we talked a lot about bread, deck ovens. I make the best chocolate chip cookie in the world.
Okay.
But I don't know how to bake it.
Okay.
No. What do you recommend? I'm making. Yeah, okay, so we're probably going to go through the same process. How many are you making?
Yeah, absolutely, because we make a convection oven that fits 5 pans, a convection oven for 10, and then we can go to a single rack oven or a double rack oven, and then even beyond that too. So it's a different type of bake when you're baking with a rack oven. In a rack oven or a convection oven, you literally have hot air that's circulating around your product, which is quite different than when you have a deck oven. And depending on the capacity that you are intending to make, it could be a lot less labor if you go with a rack oven.
I know looking at our lineup, we have 2 different rack ovens, and it's not necessarily about, there's not one does more capacity than the other. There's what's the difference between our 2 racks? Yep,
so we do have 2 different racks, and I mean, there's just such a wide variety of quality of rack ovens in this industry. We have one rack oven that if you're only needing to do 1 or 2 shifts per day, this rack oven will be perfectly fine for your need. And then we have another bakery that might want to produce product 24 hours a day, and that's a much more industrial. So we have the rotovent that would do 1 to 2 shifts per day, and then we have the rotor that's really much more of an industrial rack oven for the 24/7.
A reality of having a rack oven is when you open that door, it's a huge door, and you're using hot air. When you open that door, all that hot air comes out.
Yep.
That recovery time, that's a pretty regular issue. Is that something that you have to consider when you're talking about your rack oven?
Sure,
or I'm going to get several rack ovens. Do you know?
Yeah, sure. So again, that goes to the different levels of quality that different companies manufacture. So really, when you're talking about a rack oven like our rotor that's designed for 24/7, the recovery time needs to be fast, very fast. So you're going to want to be able to take your rack out of the oven, and you want that oven to very quickly come up to temperature again for baking, and then to come up to temperature again for steam. Otherwise, you're not really going to be able to produce 24/7.
Right, it's in name only. Right.
Yeah, it's in, right.
While you're sitting there waiting for that temp to get up.
There's plenty of rack ovens on the market that are way less money, but you're literally going to be waiting 15 minutes in between bakes because they don't have enough energy and their recovery time is super slow.
Let's talk a little bit about loading those deck ovens.
Yeah.
So I went out, I purchased a 5-deck cyclothermic oven, nice and wide, tons of pans. How do I load that thing? I can't load it manually. We need a step ladder to get to the top. Like there needs to be ways to get that in there.
There's actually several different ways, and actually, believe it or not, there is a manual way to do it. We have some long loading setters that you could actually shape your product, proof them right on these loading setters, and then 2 people could come and load 1/2 of the deck at a time. We have everything beyond that, from a scissors lift, just a mechanical loader, and then we have an integrated loader, which is quite popular. The integrated loader is quite nice. It not only loads, but it will unload, and then when it's not in use, you could park it above the top deck.
Okay.
And then actually even beyond that, we have a column loader, and beyond that we even have a robotic loader.
Can you, what's a column loader for those that don't know?
Okay, so a column loader functions quite similarly to a scissors lift, but instead of actually having the scissors portion of the mechanics, you have a column with an arm that's holding the loader, and it's going to be a counterweight up and down, and you have some options if you want to add a motor to load and unload, or to go up and down.
So being counterweighted helps you on the labor side.
Yep, absolutely.
Not as heavy.
Yep, the integrated loaders work quite similarly. Yep, and then beyond that, if you're a very large artisan bread bakery and you have multiple deck ovens, then we can go into a robotic loader that sort of works like a ghost. And we'll load and unload.
A baking ghost?
Yes, a baking ghost. And it will realize which deck needs to be unloaded, which deck is empty, and it will control everything from temperature and time to steam quantity and all of those parameters.
So fully programmable, fully automated.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. Okay. I'm going to throw you a little screwball here.
Okay.
I have a small retail bakery.
Okay.
But I'm like an artisan, and I love what I make.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna cut any corners. So I want to bake on a hearth, but I also need convection because I'm baking sweet goods and cookies, but I'm not doing a lot of production to dictate having industrial rack ovens and big cyclothermic ovens. How do I get that? Is it possible?
It is possible. I would probably send you a spreadsheet and collect all your production capacities and your bake times and temperatures. But in that scenario, I would suggest our complex oven, which is actually a combination of our modular electric deck oven. And you can have 2 decks with even a proofing chamber underneath, and then you can put a 5-pan or 2 5-pan convection ovens right on top of that 2-deck oven. So it's really a nice compact situation where you can do some deck oven baking with 2 different decks, and then you have some convection baking, and everything is at a different temperature. So you can be baking multiple products at the same time. So it's quite versatile and great for a retail bakery that's producing many different things.
This is a great little general overview, and thank you so much for taking time out and sitting down with me and kind of going through ovens.
Thanks for having me. You know what? It's a topic that I actually love. I could probably talk about it forever. So, you know what? It's a whole other thing when you get to talk about something that you like. So, I'm available to talk about it to future customers too.
Thank you for listening to the Baker's Insight podcast. For more podcasts and more info, visit bakersinsight.com.